Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre, and we are back again with another Q&A video. I asked a question on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What are some questions that you have for me? And today we're going to be going through those questions. I have around 10 to 12 questions here. Going to be answering them one by one. If you want one of your questions answered on a future show, be sure to be following on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. So we just updated our Nomos collection and also have brought back some out of stock models. We have a wide variety of clubs and club campuses showcasing some pops of color throughout, falling well under $2,000 across the entire line. The Ahoy Neomatics with their surprising 200 meters of water resistance, great looking calibers, and the proprietary swing system escapement inside. Then you have the classic and emblematic design that is the Tangente for Nomos, and also the Zurich World Timer and much more. Nomos is easily one of the best success stories in the last 30 years in watchmaking, creating tremendous value by producing their own small components, including their swing system escapement that I mentioned, and a lineup of over a dozen in-house calibers all produced in Glashütte, being the largest producer of German watches by volume. Check out the entire collection in the description down below. For our first question we have, would you say Longines is the most improved brand of Swiss luxury watches over the past couple of years? The range has expanded greatly in recent times, and they have kept their price points extremely competitive. For answering this question, I would say it depends on what period of time we're talking about. If we're speaking about the last couple of years, despite Longines being a brand that is consistently in the top 10 in the Swiss watch industry for total turnover, but on a global scale, they're very isolated in certain pockets of the world where they do a lot better. In a place where I'm from, the United States, it's a different type of understanding of what this brand is all about. And I would say they're underrated compared to other parts of the world. The one thing I will mention though that Longines I think undoubtedly has done an amazing job when you're talking about the enthusiast audience for, and why I think it's not far-fetched to say this, is just the product offering for me has just improved greatly. I mean, just look at some of the watches that they've released in the last year. We're talking about the Spirit 37 millimeters. We're looking at, say, the Zulu Time, then also the Zulu Time 39. You have the Conquest updates this year. You have those Hydro Conquest GMTs, which have honestly slid under the radar for a lot of people. This is maybe the best value for a GMT watch in this segment, and barely any people are talking about it. You have flyback chronographs. Then you have their flagship Heritage Moonphase models, which again, another one that just slid under the radar, but is a beautiful watch. And this is all in the last year, and I'm sure there's more to come from the brand. Another brand that I'll mention here is one that I have discussed in full detail in the last couple of months, and that's TAG Heuer. TAG Heuer, polarizing brand for some, but you cannot deny that they've been doing a lot of great things from the product side. Something like the Carrera glass box that was released this year. That was one of my favorite releases of 2023 at Watches and Wonders. The Monacos and their recent updates, other Carrera models, and then the Skipper. This is a great selection of watches that we've seen recently from TAG Heuer. Another brand that's more in the attainable sphere that I think is doing a great job compared to where they were. I mean, many people would classify this brand as producing mall watches, but now they're producing some pretty cool enthusiast picks, and that's Bulova. Bulova has great history, but they've now been delivering products that I think match that history. You have the Lunar Pilots now available at a smaller case size, which I think we'd love to see even more in the future, but great job that they doubled down on that. Oceanographer GMTs, Bulova Wilton from last year. Then you have those Jetstars, which I think is one of the cooler releases this year from the brand. Wearable case, high accuracy quartz movement with that sweeping second hand. Really like these. And then you have their military hack watches that look back and are informed by their World War II history in producing watches for the Allied forces. And one final brand that I'll mention is just Christopher Ward. I don't know what's gotten in the water with them, but also with other people online. And I think there's just been this piling on effect of positivity ever since the Bel Canto, which is well deserved. Now you saw the 12, people are going crazy for that watch. And I don't know what's going on. I think there might just be giving access to their pieces to certain people that have a platform online, but I understand why there's a lot of fanfare at the moment. And if they're talking about going from being positioned in a corner and being seen in one way, and then 12 months later being totally seen differently, I think Christopher Ward has almost done that, and it's pretty remarkable to see. So these are just some of the brands that I just wanted to mention here. Next question is, what watches have you owned and sold/traded and regretted it? Looking back, are there any watches you wish you could get back? This might not be for Teddy, but would be a good subject for a video or watch collectors. So I'll just answer this question pretty directly. I don't have as many regrets. Certainly there are some things that now are harder to replace than others. I mean, one thing that comes to mind was just some of a Rolex Datejust 1601 that I had. It was a gray dial, one of the first, it was really the first Rolex that I ever owned, and the fact that I don't have that anymore sometimes hurts, but now I replaced that with another Datejust, and then I sold that Datejust and kind of almost gave it away to my brother compared to what the asking price is for it now. He made a nice little killing on that when I sold it to him. But that all for myself, now that it's with my brother, don't really get mad about that. Then I had the Zen 104, which this is kind of a theme for me. I love that watch, but that's not a big hurdle to overcome to get that again, but I gave it and kind of sold it at a really good price to my cousin. This is kind of something I do regularly, is just get watches. Maybe I, in the early stages, would just get to a point where I'm not wearing it as much and then would give it to somebody or sell it to somebody that I thought was showing some interest in it. He's a pilot, so I thought that made a ton of sense, but that's a watch I would like to add again. Some vintage watches that I collected in the past, like the Omega Vintage Admiralty that I had. I think that's just a really cool sleeper pick that it's a little harder to find good examples for. That wasn't the greatest example that I had, but still a pretty interesting watch. And then another one that I'll just mention as kind of the opposite effect, a watch that I purchased that became more of a project than I was maybe anticipating, was my Tudor Submariner. I bought it at a really attainable price. I thought it was a good deal, which it was. It looked like a good deal, and I knew there was going to be some project and some work involved, but I didn't really know the degree in which I was signing up for with that watch. So it's not like a nightmare story by any means. I just haven't really sent it in. I need to send it back for service. Probably going to take months to get that fully rehauled, but there are just these things that you do. As you start to buy, you learn, you just start to figure out what you like, what you don't like, and this is part of collecting. I don't think you should have regrets. It's part of your journey. If you do feel like you're about to part with a watch that's harder to replace, those are the ones you have to be very careful of. Next question, will the Rolex Booker hasten the death of the AD model? Will the AD model see a decrease at all? So a couple things I just want to bring up when looking at this, and I did a whole video like immediately after this news came out, because it was a big deal when Rolex decided to do this. They buy essentially the largest authorized dealer in the world. But let's get a sense of scale. What does the largest authorized dealer mean? Now, it's a great, brilliant move in my opinion, but for Booker, you're talking about 100 stores globally. 53 of those locations are going to have Rolex available, and then 48 have Tudor available. That is a lot, but in the scale of Rolex, we're talking about a mass market luxury good. This is as big as it gets, and 50 stores aren't going to be the thing that's going to move the needle. You need much more. There are nearly 20% of the total Booker Rolex stores just in my state alone of Ohio, just one state, and then there are 6 times the amount of ADs in just the United States as there are Booker ADs that have Rolex. Just think about that. That's just one country. Selling Rolex is a global activity, and Booker, sure, is a small sliver of that. But when you're talking about Rolex compared to smaller brands, yes, maybe going away from an 80 model makes more sense, but this would be pulling the rug out very abruptly. And that is something that Rolex is not about. They are not going to move away from authorized dealers in a quick manner. I could see them starting to control a little bit more, especially in key markets. They could use this as part of their boutique model and extend it out. There's a lot of interesting things and questions to ask as you look at this and how this pertains to maybe some of their competitors that use Booker as one of their main selling channels. What does allocation look like in a city where there is a Booker or Torno location? There's a lot of questions. You saw what happened with Watches of Switzerland and their stock price after this news came out. A lot to unpack when it comes to this, but if you're talking about will this start to expedite the process of moving away from ADs, when you're dealing with a company that's mass market, billions of dollars, Rolex is going to go slow and steady. That's what allowed them to have the success that they've had. It's not about these drastic moves. They are operated as a trust. They think about things in 100-year-long increments, so they're not going to make any abrupt changes if they don't have to, and it still allows them to have control. One thing that was brought to my attention when I was talking to my advisor for our business, and he's been in the industry for a long time, decades and decades, and one thing he mentioned about Rolex was, in just the general industry that we're in, you look at every other industry, a lot of industries out there, and you see that there are many different retailers that start to have these majority shares in the distribution and selling of goods. You look at like electronics, Amazon, Best Buy, camera, B&H, Adorama, these type of names start to dominate how you are going to sell in the future. But if you look at the average door, especially for Rolex, the average door is not even 1% of what Rolex is selling. Yes, you have some of these anomalies, Watches of Switzerland, Booker, but over 100 years, it has really remained the same in terms of the selling model. And that is done with intention. It allows Rolex and other brands to be needed and have more leverage in their relationships through their selling channels, and allows them to not have to make the investment to go into all of these different markets. If Rolex was going to go direct to the consumer, they would either have to pull back dramatically their feet on the ground and what they could sell out of the store and change their selling model completely, which again, I don't think they want to do, or they would have to expand out rapidly, spending billions of dollars in expanding out into these different markets. And if you are doing a shop in shop and spending all of this money, how this is done is the retailer is putting up a lot of that upfront expense to be able to sell that good. So if you are a dealer of Rolex, what they're basically doing is they're mitigating their risk by having another retailer there. Yes, there is some rub with that, but this is a very involved conversation, and these are just some of my thoughts. I could go into way more detail. I'm really fascinated by this subject. Next question, moment of truth. What was your wedding watch? So I decided, and it really wasn't even I decided on anything, it just kind of happened. I got to the day, and I was thinking about, okay, I'm getting married, but as you start to think about it, you recognize that it's just a day, and what you're really setting yourself up for is what's the future looking like? I think so many people get consumed in like a wedding day, and that comes with the watch that they decide to wear. Not to say that it's not an important day, but for me, I didn't get so overly consumed in like the idea of a wedding watch. So I just kind of postponed making a decision. But what ultimately happened was I was wearing black, I wore a black suit to the wedding, and I decided to wear a watch that I'm wearing on my wrist right now. I had it on a black strap, and I just grabbed it. It was my SLGH 005 white birch. Thought it looked great. It was a watch that matched what I was wearing. It felt appropriate. It's a watch that I really enjoy and I loved, and it's probably been the most worn watch I've had this year. It made a ton of sense. And then for dinner, which was kind of our reception dinner, we only had 22, 25 people at our wedding, so it was very small. That's how we wanted it. We wanted something that was more of a micro wedding. We didn't want to stress ourselves out. I decided to wear the Wittenauer from my great-grandfather, who I'm named after. It just felt appropriate. Look back to somebody that was very much responsible for me even being alive and coming to the United States, where he came over from Italy. And then to have that watch on my wrist on a special day like that in close quarters with family members and people that I care about deeply, it just felt appropriate. That was kind of how we did it, and that was it. Next question is, what do you value more as a collector? Heritage, build quality, and finishing. So finishing and build quality, I find those as being two parallels, and it's hard to say, but I'm just thinking about this holistically here, and like, what are the things that I value when I'm looking to buy a watch? I actually thought about this question unlike some of the other questions before I got on camera, because I thought it was a good exercise. For me, what I decided was, number one is design, because design, if you don't like how a watch works, I don't care about the heritage, I don't care about the build quality, I'm not going to wear it if I don't like the way it works. So that's always number one. Number two is going to be size and application. I put both of those together because size is one thing, but it's also the application. Like, does it fit for my lifestyle? And size sometimes also gets put into the same equation as application, because the size for the style of watch and what I wanted to represent in my collection, that matters to me. If I am not going to wear it regularly, it's hard for me to justify it. Then after that, I get out of the individual subjective ideas and I start to look at the watch itself for what it means more broadly, like the finishing. Where does it stack up? This can sometimes go hand in hand with heritage though. I think these are both 3 and 4 in terms of importance. Like the watch I'm wearing on my wrist right now, the finishing on this watch is the SLGH 005. Finishing on the movement, finishing on the dial, phenomenal. The case as well. But the element that makes that even more elevated for me is the heritage and backstory of what is going on with Grand Seiko, their high beat movements, the movement that is being produced on the inside, the 9SA5. This is a revolutionary escapement system that they developed for this movement that took a decade to produce. I mean, this to me was part of the reason why I was attracted to this watch. I think so many people look at the dial of this watch, and that is the reason why they automatically made me want to get it. But for me, it was the movement. So it does just really depend case by case. And then from there, I mean, I think some people will throw in like ideas like luxury, can it grab attention, does it make me feel good, and like all that, like just to feed the ego. And then you have investment out there. I genuinely can say, I don't give a damn really much about all of that. I mean, sure, if I'm gonna spend thousands of dollars on a watch, if it's gonna completely just bottom's gonna fall out, then I wanna at least be thoughtful of that. But that's not a determining factor really for me. I don't really care about if my watch is going to appreciate. I'm a guy who doesn't really have that many hype pieces in my collection. That's not really what I'm about. If I do, it's because I love the watch, and that's first and foremost. Next question is, I just started my watch collecting journey, and I'm curious, if you could time travel and give your young self one piece of advice when you started collecting, what would it be? I don't think I would give myself one piece of advice, but if I had to break it down into a couple things that I always bring up whenever I see a comment, like some themes that I always bring up first is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Look at anything in life, whether it's losing weight, which I know a story about. When I was in high school, I lost about 75 pounds. That was something I always struggled with growing up, and it was day by day. Building a business, this whole life that I have now was done, just cranking out when nobody was looking, just putting in the time. Investing in retirement, the idea of compound interest. I'm not saying that this is an investment idea, but why I bring this up is all of these things are not developed overnight. You're able to break down the concept of collecting in a more agreeable way, in a more healthy way, in my opinion, if you do it step by step, small steps, not big chunks and giant leaps at a time. I think people get consumed in the act of moving towards that next watch always has to be so instantaneous. You have to be in a position to buy always. I don't think that's the case. And I think some of the best watches I've ever purchased took me time to come to an understanding that this is the right piece for me. Take your time, acquire, learn, understand what you like and what you don't ultimately, and keep evolving from there. The other thing I'll just throw in there as you're doing this, watches are a personal journey. This is not a journey of other people. It doesn't matter what other people think. This is not to say that collecting and getting together with people that have this shared interest isn't important, because I think it is. It allows us to be human around these objects and see the bigger picture of things. But don't conflate that with letting other people dictate what you're going to collect. Watch collecting can be an avenue for self-expression. That's part of the reason why I collect. And sometimes isolation is important in the right doses as you're starting to achieve or look to strive to achieve for that self-expression. And this is for any creative outlet. Who you want to be and the watches you want to collect can only be decided by you. And that's, I think, a great freeing idea. So do it for yourself, wear what makes you happy. That is the mentality for me. And that's what I would want to stress to my younger self. If you're doing it any other way, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. Next question is, will you do watch company tours in other countries than Switzerland? So the quick answer is yes. I have one that's probably been released at the time of posting this video. I'm not sure yet, but you'll see that. And then in addition, I have some others that are in the works. What brands would you want me to do a deep dive on, visit, do a manufacturer visit, have other just insights? This is one of my favorite things in the industry to do, is give a view of brands that oftentimes close their doors too frequently when I think they should be more transparent about things. So that's a big goal of mine in the years to come. I know sometimes people don't always have as much enthusiasm for this, but for the people that do, I love seeing the comments. It gets me excited when people say this is amazing work, this is amazing, and there's no one else doing this. That gives me a lot of joy and pride because I really do care about doing that. And then the final question, which less known watch brand has, in your opinion, the capability of becoming a well-known name even for non-enthusiasts? So I'm glad that you put less known in quotes because it's all relative. In the last 20 years, yes, there have been successful brands, but when you're talking about getting attention of non-enthusiasts, that's a different equation. There are not many brands that can go from zero to being known by the broader public. The reality is our world, even for a Rolex, is still a pretty small world. And that is, for me, Rolex, Cartier, Omega, these are the brands that really start to transcend the category of watches. There's not many though. Patek Philippe, maybe, AP, maybe, but those are done on a smaller scale, and that's really for people that are in the know. It's hard, even if you're walking on the street. Could they name a Rolex watch? Probably not, so it's important to keep that context. I mean, brands like Nomos, great brand, started in the past 35 years, have certainly grown, successful story, but are they going to be recognized by a non-enthusiast down the street? Probably not. I do think they have a lot of room to grow, but that wouldn't be my pick. Then you have FP Journe, MB&F. These are more independent brands, all these successful brands, but unfortunately these are done to a scale where they're never going to be known in the mass market. So I don't think those could be it, even though they are going to have success on their own degrees. Then you have Ming, Christopher Ward, all these indie brands, but do you really expect someone like your great aunt Gertrude to say, wow, great bel canto you have on your wrist? No, that's not going to happen. The reality is, brands like a Shinola, that went from zero to $100 million company, which is pretty impressive. Then you have Richard Mille, which is only producing 5,000 watches a year, but they are pop culturally known way beyond those 5,000 pieces and are now a $1 billion brand in the industry, which is crazy. I don't know if that's going to continue. If I had to bet, I think some of it is going to cool off, but we don't know. This is the crazy world of watches that we're in at the moment. If I had to say two that have the best fighting chance to go from, okay, they're a known brand now, but could they start to get to that next tier of maybe being known by general collectors and non-collectors. Like, that is the real test. I would say the brand that is most in position to do that, and yes, I know you said less known brand, but to get to the point you mentioned about people that are non-enthusiasts, which brands will be known by them, I think Tudor has to be the best opportunity to go from a known brand in the industry to being a potential top 5 brand in terms of total sale and turnover. Just because of the Rolex affiliation, I think that gives them way more legs. Then you have a brand like Grand Seiko, which I think has plenty of room to grow and have a good base foundation in the years to come. But they have a lot of ground to gain to get to that level. So 20 years is a long time, but it's also not. And we'll just see how watches generally evolve. But those would be a couple ways that I would think about answering your question. But all right, guys, that's all I have for this Q&A. If you enjoy these style of videos, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Great indicator that you want to keep doing this frequently. I'd love to see that encouragement. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com is a full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. And how we're able to fund all of these productions, including those factory visits and visiting brands across the world, really. That is all being done through selling watches on our site. We're able to pay our way to go do these productions, which many times can cost tens of thousands of dollars just to get our team there and be able to be available with their time. So if you want to see future content like that, what allows us all to do this is through selling watches. So we'd love to have your business. It allows us to keep doing what we're doing, and we love what we do. Guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.